You've got some data points for you to look at here that will help you make sure that you're taking the right action at the right time and talking to the right people. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Marketplace Growth by a Coil. This week, we're going to talk about the fact that everybody is in sales if you're in B2B SaaS, especially on smaller teams. And we've got 5 things to talk to you about, 5 data points that you should be aware of if you're selling in that B2B SaaS space. And with me, I've got Kate, as always. Hi, Kate.
Hi guys, how are you?
So some of the things that we want to talk about today, because again, if you're in B2B SaaS, you're in sales, whether you're in sales directly or you're on support, you're always talking to those customers, especially if you've got like a product that you hope to sell, that you're hoping that it sells itself, some sort of product led thing. You've got some data points for you to look at here that will help you make sure that you're taking the right action at the right time and talking to the right people. So Kate, we're going to start at the top here. And one of those is actually having access to your product data. Can you walk me through what good product data looks like?
Well, the reality is that you can't make informed decisions without some level of data. So when we were at Proforma, we actually spent quite a bit of time accessing and getting our data into a way that actually gave us some ways of, well, it informed us of what business decisions we made. So for us, it was about logging your event, but it's about making sure that whatever you put into place, you make it consumable and you're able to make sure it has context, because you can go down many a rabbit warren with this. So being really clear on what you're wanting to collect on, and putting it into such a format so that you can then actually do something with it. So in our case, we mapped our events and then we hooked it up to some tools. But some people I know prefer to just use the good old spreadsheet to manage their event mapping.
So there's the data side of it, but I want to sort of poke at something that you said there. And so you're using data to make decisions. And what decisions were you making?
So for us, it's understanding, or a couple of things actually. It was understanding about those users and combining the users together at an account level to actually say, so which accounts were more engaged, which accounts were moving through our key steps that we wanted them to go through, and then in our mind, they were being activated. And then once we actually had them as customers, it was about which of those are looking healthy. And so then with renewal, then we kind of had an indication of where we needed to go in terms of, do we need to chase or not chase? So strictly not sales, but in my world, for me, once you get a customer, you actually try and keep that customer, because it's all about your compound growth for your revenue.
Yeah, and we talked about that in last week's video, that you can make your sales, then you want to make sure that you're keeping your customers and then expanding on that revenue. So if you haven't watched last week's video, I encourage you to go back and have a look at that. So some of the decisions that you're making then are around when to get engaged with customers directly, maybe even making some product decisions. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Cool.
in my mind, you may decide people who are actually getting to understand your product and using your product, i.e. they've got the aha of what your product offers, you probably can leave them alone unless they're someone that you really want to get on your book and you're really, really keen to have them as a brand. But then you've probably got your middle ground of those who are partially away there, and with a little bit of a nudge, you can get them there. And then you've got the ones who basically kick the tires, have a quick look around and left. So for me, it's finding that sweet spot of those ones that are on the right track, but probably just need a little bit of support or a little bit of push to get over the line.
Hmm. And
And that's what you need your data for, because you need your data for identifying them, but you also need the data so you can then talk to them sensibly.
so, yeah, so you have your data so that when you say talk to them sensibly, it's kind of with going in with an understanding of where they actually are in the product, how they've used it, and whether or not they are getting value out of it so far. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah. But I think you also
Cool.
need to flip it to where they're not using it, and that would be the aha moment. So for like in Proforma, for us, if they built a form, that was all very nice, and on the surface, they all that good, because Proforma was a form builder. So
Mhm.
if they built a form, but actually when you thought about that, no, they needed to publish it. They needed to get the form being submitted so that data got inputted. So you actually needed further steps in the process in our mind, and or they did some fancy question design, and then you knew they were really starting to use your product. So for us, we knew once we were getting into that zone is when you could then reach out to them and say, and particularly if they'd ask any questions in support, it's even a real Monty then. You would then
Mhm.
reach out saying, what are you using what are you building? What form are you building? What use case? Look, we've actually got some use cases. Do you want to have a look at that? And, people run into these sorts of problems, XYZ, when they're doing this. So talk to us and here's some more information about that. And that used to work at Monty. It used to really, really work well. Really work
Yeah.
well.
And so taking that a step further, being able to see that product data, and then that drives that outreach or engagement with a customer on support, perhaps that maybe they've come to you. You mentioned before having the data in a usable format. Like, what does that look like? For you mentioned using a spreadsheet. What are you looking for, and what kind of format are you looking for to consume that data?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think there's different ways of doing this, but probably one of the simplest ways is you can just get all your event scores, and to me, that's kind of okay, but it doesn't give you a relative view of. So if you have a number of individuals all using your product and trialing your product, you really actually want to take that up to the next level. So by
Mhm.
being able to look actually at the account level and the sum of what the users are doing, you actually need to probably do a bit more of the math of actually pulling things together and normalizing those scores in a way, or adding some sort of boundary around them. So you're saying this one is an 8 out of 10 versus that one is a 6 out of 10. And so then you're able to say, oh, this one is at this point, whereas that one. Whereas if you had, I've got 75 events where they built the form, it kind of really doesn't give you anything. But
Yeah, it's lacking context.
I
Yeah.
used to feed it into a tool. Let's face it, that's what I like to do. I like to find things where people actually, this is what they do for a living, and so I love to just type things into that sort of stuff and cut to the chase. But I do know a lot of people who love a good spreadsheet, and you're a bit of a spreadsheet man, Pete. You might like to
I
talk
am.
on it. Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
It might put people to sleep. Yeah. If it's nap time, I can go into that for you. But
Yeah.
so I think what you mentioned there is sort of rolling up that data into an account level, which
Yeah.
again, we're talking B2B SaaS. So that's where you're selling, right? You're selling to an account. Of course, though, you are selling to human beings within that account. And so looking at, once you've sort of done that roll up and seeing where an account is, are you looking at the users individually too, to see maybe where your champion is or who you should be reaching out to?
I would think so. And I
Yeah.
used to always then cross-reference it against LinkedIn to see,
Mm,
who are they really? Which
yeah.
sounds very manual, I know. And again, if you've got thousands and thousands of leads and stuff, good luck to you. But if you're actually not in that realm, then, sometimes a little bit of effort really does get the reward. But, so we're really talking about here in the stages where you're trying to make sure that you've found the right fit for your product and you are starting to scale. And if you are scaling, well, then you definitely need to use the trawler system because that's the
Mhm.
fastest and easiest way. Because you then want to systematize your practice. You then want to say, okay, those who fit into this category, for example, are at 50, 70% engagement on our scoring index. We then will do X, Y, Z. And, in terms of marketing terms, Pete, how can you also start to pull them over? And you might have a comment on that because the sales side, to me, sales and marketing support all go as one. So
Yeah.
in that case, what would you be as a marketer with your marketing hat, those semi-engaged and looking good, what would you be doing in a marketing?
Well, I think I would be working very closely with the sales side or the people closer to the end of the deal to see what does a good prospect look like to you, and then going back into the data and helping sort of tease that out there and just outlining and defining that within that data itself. And so what we're really talking about is like product qualified leads here, where someone has taken a certain set of actions that we've deemed valuable enough to then maybe bring in sales that say this is the right time to step in and get engaged with this account. And then, like we just talked about, you've identified a hot account, and now who's that user that appears to be the champion there that you can see through that engagement data. So that's where I would kind of approach it is, what does sales want to see from these leads? And if we can pipe that into
Correct.
HubSpot, or if we can get that into even just a Slack channel to say, hey, now's the time to reach out.
Yeah.
That's what I would to do.
Agreed. And I would think also it's also then what are the sorts of messages that resonate so
Hmm.
that you can give that to your sales team.
Yeah.
So, it closes the loop on all of this.
Yeah. And I think that's a topic for another video, isn't it? Just, and also something that
Sure
we
is.
keep bringing up is that feedback loop and making sure that what's working. So is that messaging seeing its way through the entire process? Um, I think just one side note, and you mentioned this before, but if you do see an account that is highly engaged, highly like just cruising through their activation, whatever the events are that you've ID'd as important to being activated and seeing value, is to just, I think, what do we say? Like, don't poke the bear, just get out of the way and let
Yeah.
them close themselves. So you don't always have to be inserting yourself into that sales process if someone's just going to buy anyway. So I think that's
Yeah.
a really important one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's about having your data, and then it's about actually deciding how and when you're going to use that data and being very clear on what you're trying to achieve as your end game.
Yeah. So I think I might wrap this one up here and really just kind of try to summarize what we're talking about. And so again, we're talking to like smaller teams here where perhaps founder, CEO, sort of maybe everybody's in sales, right? If you're talking to customers, it's part of your job is to get someone over the line. How can you use your product itself to help you do that? And some of the ways that we talked about in this video is having access to the data, making sure that it's usable, it's in a format that you can consume and actually make sense of, looking at engagement scoring at both the account level and then down at your power user level, and also just seeing and identifying what that activation actually looks like so that you can do this in a repeatable process, not just a one-off. Whenever I happen to look at our data, that one looks good. Let's go off and see if we can email them, sort of thing. So that's what we got for today. Any closing thoughts on this, Kate?
No, other than I think it's always just keep learning and don't, what's that saying about boiling the ocean? Don't boil the ocean on this stuff. Be really clear. I just want to do one thing, learn that, and then get that under control and then move to the next thing.
Amen to that. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody. And of course, more sales to you.